From gimmick changes to theme songs and championship belts, these are the biggest upgrades in WWE history. Starting with someone who went from being a generic babyface to the most hated man in wrestling. For years, Dominic Mysterio was just Ray's kid. He'd come out with his dad, do some generic moves, and the crowd response was just mild. He was decent in the ring, but there was zero personality. But then in 2022, everything changed at Clash at the Castle. Dominic turned heel on Edge and his own father, joining the Judgment Day. But the real transformation came when he started dating Rhea Ripley and became Dirty Dom. The mullet grew out. Dom went to prison and did hard time. He started acting like an entitled brat who'd throw tantrums and hide behind Rhea whenever things got tough, and the crowd absolutely despised him. Dominic became one of the best heels in the entire company. The heat he gets is nuclear. Fans won't stop booing him, and all the baddies from Liv Morgan to Roxanne simply can't resist him. Dom went from someone nobody cared about to someone everybody wanted to see lose. That's the power of finding the right character, and Dirty Dom certainly found his. But speaking of transformations, sometimes the right gimmick change doesn't just save a career, it creates a legend. Before Kane was burning people alive and ripping off cell doors, Glenn Jacobs was a fake dentist named Isaac Yankem. In 1995, WWE thought it was a good idea to have an evil dentist character who'd attack people with dental tools. The gimmick was ridiculous, the matches were forgettable, and nobody took him seriously. After that died, they tried again with fake Diesel, which was somehow even worse. Glenn Jacobs looked like he was heading toward unemployment. But then WWE tried one more time, and in 1997, Kane was born. The 7-foot monster in a mask and bodysuit was an instant game changer. Kane couldn't speak, couldn't feel pain, and was booked as The Undertaker's monstrous younger brother. When he ripped the door off Hell in a Cell at Bad Blood, WWE had its new monster. Kane became a multi-time world champion, gave nightmares to kids all around the world, and had a career that lasted over 2 decades. He went from a comedy jobber to a monster main event heel and a Hall of Famer. But wrestlers aren't the only things that need upgrades. Sometimes the championships themselves need a serious makeover. When WWE introduced the Blue Universal Championship, the belt looked ridiculous and felt like a toy. There was no creativity, no soul, just a color swap from red to blue. The oversized WWE logo took up the entire center plate, and that blue strap made it look like something you'd win at a carnival. Fast forward to 2022, and WWE finally fixed it. The new World Championship belt, inspired by the classic big gold, actually looks prestigious. The black strap, the globe in the center, the side plates that could be customized, it felt important again. When guys like Rollins, Gunther, and CM Punk hold this title, it actually feels like an important prize instead of something you'd win at McDonald's. And speaking of title upgrades, let's talk about the tag team division finally getting a decent-looking belt. The Blue SmackDown Tag Team Championships suffered from the same problem as the Universal title. They looked like children's toys. The new tag titles on SmackDown look way better compared to those blue nickels and actually look like something worth fighting for. But moving on from belts, let's talk about one of the most iconic transformations in wrestling history. When Dwayne Johnson debuted in 1996 as Rocky, WWE thought they had their next babyface star. He was the son of Rocky Johnson, grandson of the High Chief. He had the athleticism, the smile, and WWE pushed him hard, giving him the Intercontinental Championship just 4 months after his debut. However, the fans absolutely hated him. The character was too nice, too bland, too corporate. Fans saw right through it and rejected him completely. Rocky sucks chants filled arenas every week. By early 1997, it looked like Dwayne's WWE career might be over before it really started. But then he joined the Nation of Domination and everything changed. The babyface Rocky died, and The Rock was born. The fancy shirts, the sunglasses, the cocky attitude, this was the real Dwayne Johnson turned up to 11. He started cutting promos that made people forget about everyone else on the roster. The People's Elbow and the Rock Bottom became the most over moves in wrestling. The Rock became a multi-time world champion, the biggest crossover star in WWE history, and eventually the biggest movie star on the planet. He main evented WrestleManias, had legendary feuds with Stone Cold and Triple H, and transcended wrestling completely, all because WWE finally let him be himself instead of forcing him to smile and wave. However, The Rock wasn't the only member of his bloodline who had a major upgrade. For years, WWE tried everything to make Roman Reigns the top babyface, and fans rejected it every single time. Roman main evented 4 straight WrestleManias from 2015 to 2018. He beat The Undertaker at Mania 33. He won multiple world championships, and the crowd booed him out of every single building. Fans were tired of WWE shoving him down their throats as the good guy when he clearly wasn't connecting. But then the pandemic happened, and when Roman returned in 2020, he became the tribal chief. Roman stopped asking for respect and started demanding acknowledgement. Paul Heyman became his special counsel. He formed the Bloodline with the Usos, creating the most dominant faction in modern WWE. As tribal chief, Roman held the Universal Championship for 1,316 days, the longest reign in modern WWE history. He beat John Cena, Edge, Daniel Bryan, Brock Lesnar, and everyone else WWE put in front of him. SmackDown became the tribal chief's show. WWE became his yard. Roman embraced his Samoan heritage, the family legacy, and the politics of being positioned as WWE's top guy. He went from the most forced face in WWE to the final boss everybody wanted to see dethroned. But if you think Roman's transformation was impressive, wait until you hear about the guy who upgraded from the ringmaster to becoming the biggest star wrestling has ever seen. In 1996, Steve Austin was drowning in WWE as the Ringmaster, a generic heel with thinning hair and had zero personality. Austin was talented in the ring, but the character gave him nothing to work with. He was just another guy on the roster that nobody cared about. Then Austin got fed up, shaved his head, and everything changed at King of the Ring 1996. After beating Jake Roberts, Austin cut the infamous Austin 316 promo and accidentally created the biggest merchandise slogan in wrestling history. But more importantly, he stopped being the ringmaster and became Stone Cold Steve Austin, a beer-drinking, authority-defying, ass-kicking machine who didn't care about rules or consequences. Austin became a 6-time WWE champion, main-evented 3 WrestleManias against The Rock, and literally saved WWE from going out of business during the Monday Night Wars. His feud with Mr. McMahon became the greatest storyline in wrestling history and drew the biggest ratings WWE has ever seen. But speaking of reinventions, let's talk about how one woman upgraded from a blonde, smiling babyface to the most dominant female wrestler in WWE today. When Rhea Ripley first showed up in WWE, she had blonde hair, a generic rock-inspired look, and was just another smiling babyface trying to get noticed. She was athletic and clearly talented, but there was nothing memorable about her. Rhea did her thing in NXT, had some decent matches, but wasn't standing out in any meaningful way. But then she ditched the blonde hair, went full goth, and became Nightmare Rhea Ripley. Rhea looked like she could destroy anyone in her path. She won the NXT Women's Championship and soon made a splash on the main roster. But the real evolution came when she joined the Judgment Day in 2022 and became Mommy. Rhea went from being just another wrestler to becoming the most dominant woman in WWE. She won the SmackDown Women's Championship and held it for 380 days. She destroyed Shayna, Charlotte Flair, Becky Lynch, and everyone else. Rhea's presence is completely different now. She's intimidating, charismatic, and genuinely feels like a star, all because she stopped trying to fit in and became exactly who she was meant to be. But speaking of wrestlers who went from mid-card to main event, perhaps nobody in WWE history had a more sudden upgrade than JBL. For almost a decade, Bradshaw was just a big, tough guy who hit people hard and drank beer. He started as a cowboy character in the mid-90s, became one half of the APA with Farouk, and basically played an enforcer who'd beat people up for money. It was a fun gimmick, and the APA was over with fans, but Bradshaw was nowhere near the main event. But then, in 2004, after the departures of names like Rock, Austin, and Brock Lesnar, WWE needed a main event heel for SmackDown, and they took a massive gamble on Bradshaw. They repackaged him as John Bradshaw Layfield, a wealthy corporate villain who drove to the ring in a limousine and acted like he owned everything. JBL wore expensive suits, cut promos about being a millionaire, and acted like he was better than everyone. And somehow, it worked perfectly. JBL became WWE champion by beating Eddie Guerrero and held the title for 280 days, one of the longest reigns in SmackDown history. He feuded with John Cena, The Undertaker, and Batista at the main event level. The clothesline from hell became one of the most dangerous finishers, and Bradshaw went from drinking beer in the back to being WWE champion and one of the most hated men in wrestling. The character worked because JBL committed completely. He had his own cabinet with Orlando Jordan and the Bashams. He made people genuinely hate him and filled the gap on SmackDown when the company needed him the most. But from one unexpected main eventer to another, let's talk about how Drew McIntyre went from being a pretty boy to becoming a world champion. Drew McIntyre's first WWE run was a complete disaster, and it wasn't really his fault. In 2009, Vince McMahon called Drew the Chosen One and said he'd be a future world champion. That kind of pressure would break anyone, but especially a young wrestler who wasn't ready. Drew won the IC title early on in his career, but was then put in 3MB with Heath Slater and Jinder Mahal, a comedy jobber stable that existed purely to lose matches and look ridiculous. By 2014, WWE had no direction for him and released him. Most wrestlers never recover from that kind of failure. But Drew did something different. He rebuilt himself completely. Drew went to the independent scene and got huge. Not just physically bigger, but his confidence, his presence, and his in-ring work all improved dramatically. He wrestled in ICW, WCPW, TNA, and proved he was way better than WWE had ever let him show. He got jacked, grew out the beard, and looked like an actual warrior. When WWE brought him back in 2017, Drew was a completely different person. He wasn't the chosen one anymore. He was the Scottish warrior, and he was ready to destroy everyone. Drew aligned with Dolph Ziggler, won the tag titles, then went solo, and became one of the most intimidating figures on Raw. At WrestleMania 36, Drew finally fulfilled the prophecy by beating Brock Lesnar for the WWE Championship. Even today, Drew is one of the key players in WWE's main event scene and has had solid feuds with guys like CM Punk, Seth Rollins, and Cody Rhodes. Drew went from comedy jobber to world champion by refusing to give up and completely reinventing who he was. But speaking of career revivals, let's talk about the biggest upgrade in modern women's wrestling. For years, Becky Lynch was talented, likable, and absolutely stuck in the mid-card going nowhere. She had the Irish lass kicker gimmick with the steampunk goggles and orange hair. Fans liked her, but she was always playing second fiddle to Charlotte Flair and Sasha Banks. But then in 2018, Becky snapped and everything changed. After Charlotte was added to her title match at SummerSlam, Becky attacked Charlotte and turned heel. Except the fans didn't boo her. They cheered harder than ever before. Becky stopped smiling and started calling herself the Man because she claimed she was the best in the entire company. WWE tried to make her the villain, but fans weren't having it. Becky was speaking the truth. She'd been overlooked for years while Charlotte got handed everything. At WrestleMania 35, Becky main evented against Charlotte and Ronda Rousey in the first ever women's main event at WrestleMania. She won both titles and cemented herself as the top woman in wrestling. The Becky Two Belts era began, and she became the biggest female star in WWE. When she returned from maternity leave as Big Time Bex, the evolution continued. Becky went from supporting player to the man by going against the norm and breaking through the glass ceiling. But while Becky's rise was impressive, even that pales in comparison to the next upgrade on our list. After his father Dusty passed away in 2015, WWE put Cody in a ridiculous gimmick called Stardust. He had gold and black face paint, talked in a weird voice, and was basically a cartoon character that existed to lose matches on the pre-show. Cody asked to drop the gimmick multiple times, but WWE refused. He asked for opportunities to prove himself, but WWE said no. So in 2016, Cody did something bold and asked for his release. What happened next changed wrestling forever. Cody went to the independent scene and became one of the hottest names in wrestling. He wrestled in Ring of Honor, New Japan, and everywhere else that would have him. Then in 2019, Cody helped create All Elite Wrestling and became executive vice president and one of the top stars in the company. The American Nightmare wasn't a joke anymore. He was one of the most wanted free agents in the world. But Cody had unfinished business. In 2022, Cody shocked the world by returning to WWE at WrestleMania 38. Fans who'd watched him succeed outside WWE were ready to see him conquer the company that gave up on him. He won the Royal Rumble, main evented back-to-back WrestleManias, and at WrestleMania 40, Cody finally finished his story by defeating Roman Reigns to become the undisputed WWE champion. Cody went from a pre-show joke to leaving WWE, starting his own wrestling company, becoming one of the biggest stars in the industry, returning to WWE as a megastar, and winning the world championship his father never could. That's not just an upgrade, that's a complete redemption story and one of the greatest comebacks in wrestling history. But speaking of history, check out this video next to relive the greatest era in WWE history.